Hello, BookTube. As you may know, if you've been watching this channel, the Bean and I recently spent a week up in Vermont at the house of Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, an old house in the middle of nowhere in Vermont, and it was delightful. Absolutely delightful. And we went book hunting. Mark and I did plenty of times and got lots and lots of stuff. But the one thing I couldn't do while I was up there was go to the Brattle Bookshop. And I missed it, of course. There's no substitute for your own bookstore. And I've been going to the Brattle Bookshop for 50 years at least. So they're a used bookstore in downtown Boston, and they are crammed with books. And they have an outdoor sale lot next door that's also crammed with thousands more books for $1, $3, or $5. And they turn over their stock all the time. That's the Achilles heel of a lot of used bookstores, is that they don't. But the Brattle does. They turn their stock over all the time. So you could go every day and find something new every day. I don't quite do that anymore. There have been plenty of years when I did, but I don't quite do that anymore. But by the time I got back here from Vermont, as irrational as it is, since I don't need any more books, I was missing the Brattle. So I went first thing this morning. Carts were outside. It was cold, but the carts were empty. There was no one around. I have a feeling that people are being very slow trickling back to Boston from their Thanksgiving weekends. And I don't blame them at all after the 2 years that America has had. Americans are famously overworked at their jobs. If you can get the time, take the time. Absolutely. So I had the carts to myself, basically. And I shopped to my heart's content and got a pile of books. Now, the pile of books is not accurately represented in what I'm going to show you, because there are a few of them that I can't show on camera because they're for one or two of you and you might be watching. But I still got plenty for myself. And the oddest thing about this particular batch is that there's no frivolity at all. I got so-called heavy books. Now, they were also literally heavy books, I noticed, because I didn't have anyone to help me carry them. But I got serious books. Usually my Brattle haul wanders all over the map in terms of the depth of the book, but in this case, no, not so much. And no paperbacks, just all hardcovers. The first one being part of a set. I broke up a set. I know there are some of you who don't like that, but the set's going to get thrown away anyway in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, when they don't sell at all, except maybe one or two to me. The whole thing's going to get thrown in the dumpster. No one's going to want it. And I didn't want all of it. I just there was only one volume that I wanted out of 20-something, 12 or 13 volumes. So those of you who are purists will hate me for that, but I like the look of the book. And I have it. I have an e-copy of it, of course, but I think I have another copy of it that I don't like half so much. This is what the editors decided to call the critical essays of Charles Lamb. In this lovely thing with the deckled edges and the gold embossed there, Charles Lamb on the cover there. Just a lovely little volume on Lamb's. Let me show you the frontispiece here. With its I think there's Fanny Kelly, and then we've got an onion skin over the front. There we go. This is from 1903. Does it tell me how many? No, it doesn't. But I think it was 12 or 13 volumes, and. This is not the Elia essays of Lamb. Those have a volume of their own. And it's not anything else. It's just critical stuff. Lamb writing about the theater. He was a first-rate theater critic, a first-rate thinker of dramatic works, about dramatic works. And also him writing about literature, including reviews of new books of poetry or whatever that happened to be out in his day. All in this lovely little volume that I just liked it too much to leave it, but I didn't want to get all of the other Lamb stuff that was there, so I just got this one, and I was curious to see. You can't really make it out here, but from the deckled edges, you might be able to tell that this from 1903 wasn't an uncut book. Books used to be woven into folds in their printing process, so when they came out to market. Some of the folds in that process were outward facing. So you'd turn the page and two of the pages would be lumped together. They would be part of each other. I wonder if I can find one here to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Yeah, here we go. Right here in an essay on Wordsworth, we have an uncut page. See that? So what you had to do a century ago or more, was go at this with the equivalent of a CD knife. There used to be a little tiny little knife that you would buy. You could buy it at the counter at your music shop to open CD jewel cases. And this is the same way. You needed a knife to cut the pages of the book. It was a foolproof, almost foolproof way to quickly judge the sincerity of your host. If you were went over to a host's house and they had tons and tons of books, and they left to go to the bathroom, you could quickly get up and see whether or not any of the books had uncut pages. And that would be a surefire way to know that the host is bragging about what they look like, but hasn't read them. Because, of course, you can't read a book while keeping its pages cut. There's no way to do that. The joke, it's in all kinds of Victorian literature, is that reviewers would often read just enough of the book. You can't read it all, but you can read some of it with the pages uncut, and then sell the book. And you'd get more money for an uncut book than you would for a cut book. That used to be a surefire game that people like the Sitwells or the Wolfs would play when they were going to some pompous person, some pretentious person's house, would be to immediately leap up when they had the freedom of the room and see how many of the pages had been cut. So I was curious about this thing. I was curious. I mean, someone must have owned that whole set, and it was probably a very long time ago. I wanted to see what the original reader of this was like, so I started paging through it. The original reader of this thing read the theater chrism at the beginning of the book. They read Lamb on the theater. And the minute he starts to talk about literature, well, they stopped. And then the pages are uncut as soon as you get to literature. So it was a stereotypical theater kid who read this. It was the previous owner for this. So I have a knife. Butter knife doesn't work. It'll destroy the pages. You need something nice and sharp. I have a nice sharp knife. It is the full length of these pages. I will just cut my way through this book. And I will do it all at once. I'll do it in one sitting, so that if I pick this thing up and I want to read one particular part of it, I won't suddenly have to go and find that knife. I'll just uncut all the pages. I have a feeling that if I lived back then, I would probably have done that anyway. And to hell with the resale value, I just would have cut all the pages anyway, so that I didn't have to constantly worry about whether or not I had a knife nearby. So I got the critical essays of Lamb, which will go on the big bookcase of books about books and essays, reviews and such. There are reviews in here. So then this next one is also old. Is this also the early part of the 19th century? Let's see. Yeah, 1907. So not 1903, but 1907. And this is Roman sculpture. Nice squat book on Roman sculpture. Let me get you, once again, we'll get the frontispiece. There we have Julius Caesar. And then we have the onion skin. And then we have this, Mr. Arthur Strong, from Augustus to Constantine. This is Roman sculpture, where the author, employing art knowledge and also just classical history knowledge that used to be the common coin of the realm for all educated people, walks you through all of the sculpture. The columns, the bas-reliefs, the freestanding sculpture, the sacred sculpture, all of it. I love these sorts of things. I don't know how well this particular volume will hold up. Certainly there are much more recent scholarly volumes on Roman sculpture. I have read some of them. I've enjoyed them very much. I don't think I have anything on Roman sculpture now, but this was dirt cheap. There was no way I was going to leave it behind. And then this next one is a book that I have had many times. I've shown it on this channel many times. I love it. But this copy is in much, much better shape than the only copy that I have here. This is Bernard Heydrich, the great bird writer, the great natural historian. And this is his classic work, Ravens in Winter. The work that introduced him, I think, to the most number of readers. I think this is where the Ravens in Winter did really well for a bird book, and introduced this author to a whole bunch of people. He'd had a couple of books before this. He had a bunch of books after this. This is utterly charming about ravens. It's not just about their adaptations to get through the winter, although that subject has always interested this author. He actually did a whole book called Winter World, specifically on how animals, especially animals with high metabolisms and no margin for error, actually live through cold northern winters that can sometimes be brutal. hasn't been brutal yet. Here in this particular part of the North, hasn't been brutal yet, but it could still happen. We are almost at December. After all, that might be time for a little chilly weather. I had a copy of. I always try to have a copy of this, but the copy that I have, the minute I saw this, I realized, well, okay, you're trading up, and since these are cheap, I don't mind doubling on copies to just get the perfect one. Then we have. You saw these were all hardcovers, but the rest of these are not only hardcovers, but they have those library-style transparent plastic glosses over them. I wasn't going to pass that up. This first one is Stephen Spears. A lot of you will know him. Stephen Sears. A lot of you will know him for Landscape Turned Red, his Civil War book. And that was a study of Antietam, and it did so well that it prompted Sears to write books on a whole bunch of other signature battles of the American Civil War. And this is his big book on Gettysburg, with this plastic dust jacket. I've had this before in a hardcover. I've had it before in a trade paperback. I always managed to give it away, but I'm going to try and hold on to this one. This author is really, really good in writing just very approachable narrative history. And Gettysburg is a subject of perennial interest for me, no matter how many times I study it. It's one of the American battles that I've studied the most, because it's just so redolent with the what if of everything. You know, what if General Lee had not decided to do this? It was a lunatic decision. What if he had come to his senses and never crossed into Pennsylvania? If he dug in his heels and put an army that was still very effective, was starving to death, but it was still very effective. If he had dug in his heels and put that army to use in defending Richmond, the war could have gone on to 1670. Instead, he decided on something that had no chance of working. None whatsoever. And it was his ruin. So, but you have to wonder, on one side, the what if is, what if Lee simply hadn't decided to do this? What if he decided to listen to the sane voices on his councils and not do this? And on the other side of the what if is, what if the North had decided to destroy Lee's army at Gettysburg? It could have done that. It might not have been completely easy, but it could have happened. In which case, then who knows what would have happened? Almost certainly, the South would have had to sue for peace. They would have been defenseless. I always think about those things, but the actual narrative of the battle is also fascinating. And I read this when it first came out in 1992, I want to say? 2003. I read it when it first came out, and Sears does a great job of it, of all the different days of the battle. I've read so many books on this. They met at Gettysburg. There's a whole series of individual books just on each day of the battle, and a bunch of others. And I really like this one. I think it's probably my favorite book by this author. So I was happy to find it in a hardcover with plastic protection. That's great. Then this next one, also something that the only thing by this author that I have ever wholeheartedly enjoyed. And again, a hardcover in a dust jacket. This is Alberto Manguel, and this is A Reader on Reading. This is his treatise about reading and all that it's meant to him over the years, with far less in the way of tub-thumping cod profundities than most of his other works have. This has far less of that, almost none. I think because the subject of your own reading, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, how things have struck you over the years, what things you've been wrong about, is an inherently humbling thing. It's tough to be the typical Alberto Manguel. It's tough for him to achieve his typical narrative style when he's writing about that subject. The only thing wrong with this book is this. That is underneath the plastic dust jacket, which means I will have to very carefully remove the plastic dust jacket, slide the actual paper cover out of it, get rid of this, rub it off of that cover, and then insert the cover back into the plastic. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's worth it. And this is the only one of the books that I got today that I'm going to reread tonight. It's the only one that goes on that pile immediately, no matter what the mail brings. Then we have something. I have this in trade paperback. I read it, reviewed it when it was in hardcover, then I got rid of it, and it stuck with me. So when this author's next book came out, I asked the publicist, I'll gladly take the new book, but can I have a copy of the old one as well? And they sent me the trade paperback, which I have, but I'd much rather have a hardcover because I go back to this. And I found it in hardcover with a library dust jacket. This is Timothy Snyder, Bloodlands, which will make you rethink everything that you think comfortably about the war in the West in World War II. And all of it written in such angry, brilliant prose that I cannot sing the book's praises high enough. I think it had some contentious brickbats thrown at it by critics in its day. I wish I had been saving those reviews. This came out in 2010, and I was not. I do not have those reviews. But I'm going to swap this out for my trade paperback. And just get rid of the trade paperback, maybe to one of you. I'd much rather have the hardcover of this. This is an outstanding work on a subject that has been covered from here to Timbuktu and back. And then this next one, I have had this in a Penguin trade paperback many times, but I don't remember ever seeing a hardcover used again. And again, I go back to it so often that I started to look askance at the trade paperback. It seemed not to be sturdy enough. It's by Harry Stout, and it's called Upon the Altar of the Nation, A Moral History of the Civil War. That's the American Civil War, and this is the author looking not so much at the usual tapestry of major battle after major battle after major battle, but of the incredibly prominent moralizing that went on both sides of the war for the whole of the war. That led Abraham Lincoln to say, well, both sides call upon the Creator and swear that he's on their side. One of them, they can't both be right. One of them must be wrong. Both of them might be. That kind of explicitly moral tone for this war was there from the beginning and just kept on through the end. This is a brilliant work. Just brilliant. In more along the lines of conceptual history, whereas the Sears book is more narrative history. I'll take it either way as long as the author does it really well. I'm very happy to add this to my Civil War. I have a shelf of Civil War books, and this is one that I would want. I can curl up as well as anybody can to one after another of those big thumping battle histories. I like them just fine. I'm not knocking them at all, but I want a spot on that shelf for the books that are thinking deeply about this sort of thing instead of just lining up General Meade's dispatches in the order in which they were given. That not to denigrate, writing a really good narrative history of the Civil War, any battle therein, is really tough to do. But more ideological studies like this are extremely welcome. To find this in a hardcover with a plastic jacket on it already, protected against the ravages of Steve, is just fantastic. That was it. That was, aside from a few gifts, that was the Brattle for this Monday morning, going back to the Brattle after being away for a week. It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I not only shopped all over the books, I talked with the staff and just had a blast. The only bad part about it was lugging all these things back here, but now I'm back here and I get to play with them. So we have Upon the Altar of the Nation, the moral history of the American Civil War. We have Bloodlands by Timothy Snyder. If you are interested in World War II history, you should read this book. Definitely, you should read this book. Don't know how much you'll fight with it. Initially, I fought with it quite a bit, but you will never read anything quite like it on the war. Then A Reader on Reading by Alberto Mangual with this thing. Ooh, we'll be getting rid of that. I can make it so that you never guess that was there. Then Gettysburg by Stephen Sears. It's just slightly, as you can see, it's just slightly cocked, as Jason Harrigan would say. I'll see if I can fix that, but I'm happy with it either way. I don't plan on getting rid of it. Then The Ravens in Winter by Bern Heinrich, to replace a slightly ratty copy that I have. Roman Sculpture from over 100 years ago, just a big handbook and description of the history and what we know of Roman sculpture. And finally, and finally, the critical writings of Charles Lamb, sliced off and put together by what seems like a very good, conscientious editor. Part of a big set of Charles Lamb that I didn't want. This was the only thing that I wanted. And it's it and the Mangual book will go on the Books About bookshelf. But none of the others rise to the level of immediacy other than the Mangual. That I will reread tonight. So there you go. That was a trip to the Brattle. I suspect it won't be the only trip to the Brattle this week, but either way, you will be the first to know. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.